bricklayer. It's a dirty, hot job very often. In fact, they say you should never tell a bricklayer to go to hell because that's where he works.
Charlie Framp lays bricks in the steel furnaces at the Redbourne Works in Scunthorpe. He's been doing it for 22 years. His father did it for a lifetime. Now he's had enough. He seeks a new kind of power. For the past 2 years, Charlie Framp and 500 other shop stewards like him have been discussing plans to take over industry. Even nationalisation doesn't give Charlie Framp what he wants.
The old type of nationalisation is a big joke. Hundreds of thousands have been affected, put out of their industries, out of their work, with no chance of appeal, with no chance of affecting the changes that have taken place in their industry. Control is the only answer to this. Control by the ordinary people in the industry and in the community at large.
Tonight we report on the men who say, "Give us the works."
Workers are not, in this day and age, going to always accept the role of sacrificial goats like that. They're going to do something about it. It's their community too. It's their industry. It's up to the workers, and I think that they are beginning now to make their voice felt.
Advocates of workers' control are not just arguing for communism, nor are they odd men out. Leading politicians and trade unionists at this week's Labour Party conference are committed to changing the way industry is run. Jack Jones is top executive in Britain's biggest union, the Transport and General Workers. He has the power to change things and the method. He led the Labour Party's Special Commission on Industrial Democracy, which has worked out detailed plans. This month he told the TUC, decisions taken often in isolation by faceless men in industry, the men at the top, can affect the lives of tens of thousands of our people. While firms are growing larger and industrial techniques are tending to reflect the methods of the 21st century, management still often relies on attitudes to workers typical of the 19th century. In these circumstances, there is the strongest possible case for greater influence on the part of the working people in the decision-making of industry. Hugh Scanlon, leader of Britain's second biggest union, the Engineers, also wants workers involved in management. He says, workers are demanding an effective voice in management policy. This aspiration is particularly concentrated in regard to the nationalised industries, where obviously the greatest scope is offered for the demand that management be obliged to obtain the consent of workers in all matters of industrial policy. Fundamentally, the aim is the wearing down of sides in industry, with no superiors or inferiors, only differences in functions based on knowledge and ability. Ian Mercado, Union President and Chairman of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Nationalised Industries, is another believer. Times have changed, he says, but the workers' status hasn't. Their say is limited to ridiculous details. Ian Mercado says he can express a view on how many towels there should be in the lavatory or how many stands in the cycle park. But if he tries to influence the number of boring machines on the shop floor or the number of forklift trucks in the dispatch bay, he is told that such questions are management prerogative and therefore none of his business. Go away, little man, and count the towels in the lavatory. Anthony Wedgwood Benn, the Minister of Technology, feels industrial democracy is no trivial debate. Much of the industrial unrest, especially in unofficial strikes, stems from worker resentment and their sense of exclusion from the decision-making process. Wedgwood Benn warns of disaster unless there is change. France was torn apart this year, Britain could be next. He says it's a problem that goes way beyond the shop floor. Discontent expressing itself in despairing apathy or violent protest could engulf us all in the bloodshed. It is no good saying that it could never happen here. It could. They're agreed on the principle, but just how workers should help run their industries is a fundamental problem. The British Steel Corporation, for which Charlie Framp ultimately works, is trying out one method of giving workers their say. They've appointed worker directors.
A man who works in the industry has 30 years or 40 years of his working life. Whatever happens in that industry has a bearing on how his life is going to be spent within that industry. I think it is essential that, in fact, he has a say in the running of the industry.
That man has a say of a kind in his industry. His name is Jack Sturman. One-time mayor of Scunthorpe, An important union figure, he's been a steel worker for more than 30 years. Now he's also a director, one of 12 worker directors appointed this year following demands by the steel unions. He sits on a regional board which decides the way the steel industry is run for 60,000 men in his area. The system seems a glib answer to the call for participation. Jack Sturman has his own doubts.
Well, the failing in the present position, as I see it, for the 12 directors who, in the main, have been trade union officials and, in fact, accountable to the work people and to their trade unions, is that, in fact, we are no longer accountable to anyone but ourselves. We have been appointed as individuals onto the boards for the value of our advice, of our past experience in the steel industry. And I can accept and realise some of the arguments that have been put forward for insisting that we should ought to divorce ourselves completely from our trade unions and the activities of our trade unions. I think this is a great pity and a great failing that there is this vacuum that we are finding ourselves in at the present time, and that there is no machinery where in fact we can report back to anyone or be answerable to our trade unions, to our colleagues, or anyone in the industry. And for this very reason I think this will be looked at very sceptically by the workers themselves, who many of them will hope that we are going to make a success. But I still believe that this vacuum has got to be filled in between ourselves and the man right on the shop floor level.
Charlie Goddard is as near to the shop floor as you can get. He's a bricky's mate at Redburn. He's also a believer in workers' control and a convinced critic of the way the worker directors were appointed.
We wanted an electoral link with the shop floor with the worker directors. This we feel we don't have at the moment, because these directors were appointed rather than elected. While they will be sitting on the boards, and presumably they will be having some say in the decision making at board level, there will be no link with the people they are supposed to represent on the shop floor. They will not be accountable in any way, shape or form. And we feel that the most important thing is that the workers on the shop floor will see this as just another move to include one or two workers who will then become part of management.
You're doing very well. I'll call on Mr. Dawson to talk about the production side of the last period and anything that might arise from it.
To many in management, this is as far as participation for the workers needs to go. The Works Council for joint consultation, the traditional answer of many bosses when the workers demand a say. Redburn's Works Council is composed jointly of managers and workers. The workers are elected by their trade union branches. It's been going for 20 years. Charlie Goddard.
Well, the present system of joint consultation, we feel, doesn't go far enough. At the moment, the joint consultative machinery only seems to provide a sort of base for complaints by workers and certain pronouncements by management or management representatives after decisions have been made. So there is no real to and fro. There is no real impact that workers can make on decision making at all.
There's no reciprocating lance. Is it living up to its expectations, or is it too early yet? Because it seems to me that the tonnage seems to be remaining pretty static.
Would you,
Oh, yes,
but the tonnage is without doubt assisted by it.
I haven't got the figures right up to date, but we're up to stop period. We're almost 500 tonnes a week above what we were for a similar number of weeks last year from when we put the lamps in. But as Mr. Davis said, it's the lining itself isn't...
The extra tonnage has come. We haven't yet achieved the improved lining life. A fair question, Charlie, and that's a fair answer. I think we've had some of the benefit and not all we'd hoped for so far.
For Charlie Framp and Charlie Goddard, the worker director system is a sham. The Works Council is all right, but it doesn't go far enough. What more do they want?
We want more than the right to work or wages paid for the jobs done. These are important issues, but we want more than this. We want a real say in the running of the industry and every aspect of it that affects our working lives. I, as a worker, would like to feel that once outside of industry, I am treated in the main as a responsible person with certain democratic rights. At the moment, once we enter the factory or the shop floor, we have to leave these democratic rights behind us. We would like to see these democratic rights extended onto the shop floor. What I mean by workers' control is a real say by the workers in the day-to-day running of the industry.
We feel that if we had the sort of departmental committees where worker representatives were given much more information than what they are at the present moment, then they can sit down, still with the people who will be responsible management-wise, and help to make the right sort of decisions for that department. By this, I mean the sort of information about costing, new techniques introduced into the department, any aspect of technological change. All these things, of course, will have a very important bearing on the workers in this department. It is only right and only just that they should be brought in at the ground level.
The working lives of the 4,000 men at Redburn are largely the concern of the Labour manager, Ray Phipps.
I have a great deal of sympathy with the aims of industrial democracy insofar as it's setting out to achieve the greater involvement of people and to make them feel that they have a stake in the enterprise, which they undoubtedly have. I think that many managements, and indeed many people on this management here, are prepared to accept that there must be social accountability. That is to say that there must be some form of accountability to the people who work for us or who work with us. In order to become involved in this way, people must be able to question and discuss and debate management's actions, and indeed their own actions. In order to do this, I believe it's going to be necessary more and more in the future to give people the kind of information that they need to ask these sort of questions intelligently. In other words, we've got to open the books. We've got to be prepared to present the facts and put them on the table so that people can debate and discuss intelligently the kind of problems that face all of us. Management often sounds defensive when it's talking about industrial democracy. And let's face it, this is perhaps inevitable in that we're no more keen to lose our freedom and prerogatives than any other group of workers. But my particular objections to this idea aren't based on the questions of losing management's prerogatives. It's based on, I think, on much more sensible grounds. Let me say that we're not afraid to experiment in this field of participation. It may well be that there are considerable gains to be had out of industrial democracy. But the fact remains that I am still unconvinced, and so are many others like me. The atmosphere and the attitudes on the plant which enable a shop steward, or come to that, any of the men, to freely approach their manager and discuss their problems, to bring ideas, to criticize actions, and for this to be taken in good part and understood in the kind of atmosphere that makes for good relationships. Now, we have that kind of attitude here, and I'm not pretending that we don't have our quarrels from time to time. We're like any other community, we do. But it's my view that these informal procedures are good, that they work, and that the proposals concerning industrial democracy will neither improve nor better those.
Whether the way Ray Phipps does things will work in the future is open to question. The debate on industrial democracy is developing at a time when the steel industry is about to be torn apart by new methods and machines. Although still at an early development stage, this furnace produces 4 times as much steel as any one of the furnaces the steelworkers have worked with for generations. Steel in the 70s will be a very different industry from the one these men know now. The immense reorganization will make 1 man in 3 redundant within the next 5 years. Towns like Scunthorpe, entirely dependent on steel, have reason to be concerned.
It's pretty obvious that if these changes of this magnitude is to be carried through, it cannot be done without the cooperation of the labour force. What happens to steel is our concern. We want to say in the decisions. We want to make our contribution. We want to see that the changes are humanised, that they are made in full consideration of everything that's involved. If there is to be progress, it must be the work people are going to share in that progress. It's not just a matter of redundancies, it's not just a matter of redeployment, because when all the change is over and the dust is settled about change, there is still the working environment to be considered of the people. If these redundancies are thrust upon us, I think that we shall have to defend ourselves as long as they are thrust on us in an environment, political and industrial, that we have at the moment. Workers, I don't think, could accept the changes on the present terms that they are proposed.
The old ways are the best ways for Eddie Marsh. He's a traditionalist shop steward at Redburn.
As far as industrial relations are concerned, as a trade unionist, I'm reasonably happy with the system and the setup at the present moment. The trade unions, as I say, have a role to perform. I think they are performing it, and I think it ought to be left entirely to the trade unions to perform any role in the future. There's going to be a certain amount of redundancy. Now, I say that the best people to deal with redundancy are the men who have been used to this thing all their lives and are the heads of the trade unions. They are the men most competent to see that the redundancy, if there is any which we know has to come, and when this comes about, they are the men that I think are the most capable of looking after this question of redundancy in conjunction with management. I do not think there can be a more democratic way of doing things than by getting duly elected officers, to myself, which by tradition through the ages has always been, duly elected officers to look after the interests of the workers on the shop floor.
But traditionalists like Eddie Marsh are being overtaken by events. Even the TUC, not notorious for wanting change, has cautiously accepted that the participation of workers must be extended. The Labour Party's mid-term manifesto, out this weekend, emphasises the need for it. And it's barely a revolutionary idea. West Germany has had workers sharing power with management since the early 50s. But if it did happen here, if Charlie Framp got everything he wanted, would it work? World in Action invited the four people at Redburn to thrash out the issues of worker participation. Charlie Framp, the bricklayer who believes workers must have real control over managers and nothing less will do. Charlie Goddard, co-founder with Framp of one of the first societies for industrial democracy. Ray Phipps, the Labour manager. And Eddie Marsh, the traditionalist shop steward who agrees with Phipps that there will always be them and us.
Look, management are telling workers all the time in the pursuit of their own intentions that this industry is inefficient. We are going to make it more efficient. We are going to do this. We are going to get LDs. We are going to make this lot. We are going to do this. Yeah. Management themselves are consistently saying this, that we're going to make this industry a lot more efficient. Now, then, if management are as good as you say they were, the old time, who made them inefficient in the first place?
Nobody is saying that management's perfect. What we're saying is this, that to run an industry efficiently does require a certain amount of skill. And you cannot just produce that skill by voting in a government. There will always be two sets of interests, whoever is the management. Even if we were to turn the trade unions over and say, you are management and the managements were made workers, you will still get this split between conflict of interest. There's an inevitable conflict of interest. And we're wrong to think that conflict is always harmful. It isn't. Conflict is sometimes very beneficial.
So is dialogue. If conflict is beneficial, then the dialogue must be complete. But if you want the conflict without the dialogue, you are not rendering nobody
well, we know that we get the dialogue.
You don't know this.
We do.
You don't know this.
We talk to one another daily. There's a great...
You and I talk to one another daily.
Yes.
And we don't talk daily, not by any means.
Well, I mean, all right, but insofar as there are a large number of unions on the plant...
When we have a conflict, we meet.
No, that's not
that
true.
this leaves the general run of shop floor, the planning of the work and everything.
You meet your manager very frequently indeed.
If you want to let a contract of something that we feel we could handle, you do it.
It doesn't get away from this point that in the long run, you have got to have a manager and you've got to have people who are managed.
We are talking about the function of management. I am talking about the composition of management. And I say a management composed of the representatives equally of labour and of capital is just as likely, even more likely, to be efficient over the long term as a management composed solely of the representing shareholders.
Yeah, but how can you train? Look, how can you get people? Well, let's put it this way. At the moment, you've got. We admit that management is having to become more and more professional.
Yeah.
How can you introduce unprofessional people into a professional sphere and then pretend that
they're
there
not
is an
unprofessional
expertise
people. People engaged in the industry are not unprofessional people. They are professionals. And what we are saying that we're not saying that every Tom, Dick and Harry should automatically sit on the steel board or something like this, but we say the way should be open for the men who are most able to go forward to this level.
But that way is open.
And we are saying put the representatives of labour side by side with the specialists in order that the decisions finally taken can be accepted as democratic decisions.
And would you say, Charlie, that the men from the shop floor are competent to make these decisions?
Well, would you say that the men from the shop floor were competent to elect you to represent them? Do you think that was a good choice or a bad choice?
I can't see how you can be both management and trade unionist if you're to do your two jobs effectively. Can't see how the two things can mix. You say that they should come from the shop floor, but the fact remains that what you're asking for is participation in decision making. You want to be part of the executive.
Yes.
In effect.
Yes.
Right. Now, if you're going to take executive action, you have got to be able to justify that action. And if you're going to be honest to yourself at times, you're going to, and act honestly, you're going to take some actions which, so far as the people on the shop floor are concerned, is against their direct interest. For example, take a case of redundancy, shutting down a particular piece of plant.
Why do you assume that all workers are fool that they're going to contest any decision that they feel to be against? Obviously, I mean, this is an insult to every averagely intelligent worker.
Suggesting
that he cannot take an unpopular decision, that he cannot. You've had experience on this plant when action has been necessary and the workers have been satisfied that certain action has been necessary, they will accept it. You as labour officer, have had proof of that over and over again. And to consistently insinuate, because there is an unpopular decision to be taken, workers shouldn't participate in it.
No. We know that an electoral system is a very capricious thing indeed. You can get some good people go through, you can get some very poor people go through. It seems to me that there's a much more certain way of getting ability to the top in the way in which it goes through at the moment, rather than trying to get it through by some means of election.
Well, all right, let's take this point up. I mean, you say that some people can get to the top. I admit this. Some people can get to the top on ability. But this leaves quite a lot left behind who have still got ability. What about some opportunities for these people? They still want to have some say, you know, in their own work environment. Under the present system, they are denied this. Now, you also say that the electoral link is a rather questionable one, particularly in industry. This, you know, is a pretty shattering thing to say. After all, as a democracy in this country, democracy itself is based on electoral link and accountability.
Surely what we're after is trying to get an efficient industry which will reflect the efficiencies of the people who work in it. Let's pretend that simply by electing people onto some council or some board or some form of management level that we are going to get expertise there that hasn't existed in the past.
It isn't just a question, surely, of expertise. All the time, this dwelling on expertise and efficiency, vitally important as they are, there is something else at stake here, and this is human beings. Surely the whole purpose of industry isn't to harness people to the needs of industry, but to harness eventually industry to the needs of people.
What happened in France shows it could be important that somebody finds the right answer on participation here. a genuinely democratic bridge between them and us. Ray Phipps.
I still remain unconvinced that the Joe Bloggs in the melting shop will be any more fundamentally involved in the enterprise as a result of this system.
A last word from Charlie Framp.
What we've got to do is to develop our democracy. And workers' control movement is a part of this. What we want is an industrial relations system that's in harmony with democracy. Democracy should not be just a political system, it should be a type of society